Hi, everyone. You cannot see me, but you can hear me. Oh, that's creepy. No, the other way around. You cannot see me, but you can hear me. I don't know what I said. Okay, let me turn on my camera. Yes, you see me now. Hi, good to see you all. How are you today? Feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to talk. I'm not going to mute you. Feel free to use the chat. You're doing that already. Today I stayed home because my connection from the office was kind of shaky. A lot of new students who use EduROM and they download all sort of good things, learning resources. So I decided to stay home. You might eventually hear my cat scratching the door to enter. I'm not gonna let her this time. For security reasons, I guess we have also enabled the waiting room, so I have to admit you every time you request to join. So that makes things a bit more complicated because, I have to stop my line of thinking in order to press the admit button. All the kinds of annoying sounds as well. So I guess you can all see my screen. Is that correct? Good. I will try to navigate, like go back and forth just to make sure I can transition. Do you see the next slide? Awesome. So let me take it back from the beginning. So this webinar is recorded, and we will upload it later on so that people who weren't able to attend, they can watch it offline, or you can rewatch it because we're going to have an amazing webinar. So if you don't want your faces to show or whatever, feel free to turn off your camera. Even though I have to admit that I really like looking at your faces because it also gives me some kind of interaction. So I'm not just talking to the wall. Even though I have to admit I'm very good at talking to the wall. So no worries about that. I can make it. Yeah, due to the extraordinary situations, us having to do it only online and not having met before, um, feel free, to take it to your own time. If you want to just, put it on pause and go drink water, whatever it feels comfortable, feel free to be in your pajamas. These are extraordinary situations. So health, mental and physical health always come first. Also, if you struggle with personal issues due to COVID or whatever, feel free, to text me or send a private email, and we can discuss everything that bothers you and find a solution to that. Okay, so if we are ready, I will start with something that I have prepared for today. So welcome in week 2 of the course, Introduction to Learning Analytics, and today we will talk about learning in context. So last week we discussed about the definition of learning analytics, and we also gave some basic examples of learning analytics that we commonly come across in our journey of learning. So we talked about student and teacher dashboards, we presented some risk assessment predictive models, and so on. So if you go to Google and you Google the term learning analytics and you look for word clouds, which by the way I did, and you see the results on the screen, we will get a quite good and accurate representation of the everyday popular interpretation and summary of the field. So in other words, what people think when they hear the term learning analytics. And what we will see is that usually we have terms that come up that relate to computational approaches. So for example, terms like data, indicators, algorithms, visualizations, and so on. So learning analytics is inherently related and associated with computational approaches. However, what these word clouds usually don't show is that learning analytics is primarily, first and foremost, about learning. And this is something that we should always take into account when we deal with data in this domain. So learning analytics is fundamentally different than other related domains, such as, for example, business analytics or healthcare analytics. So learning cannot be measured or evaluated in a similar way as we would do, for example, for business processes or product success, to evaluate if a product is successful. And learning is definitely not the same thing as measles or flu. We don't look for a way to get cured from learning, So before we go on into data and methods that relate to learning analytics, it only makes sense to briefly discuss contexts in which learning takes place and where learning analytics can be applied. And the reason you see me doing this is because the presentation for me is on this screen. Okay, so where learning happens. Learning is typically and traditionally associated with the idea of a physical classroom where a lecturer delivers content to the listening audience. Usually, the lecturers in a typical classroom use two channels: the audio, that is by speech, so I talk to you and I deliver content, and the visual. So I'm using a projector or I'm using a blackboard to write equations and so on. However, despite the popular opinion, people do not only learn in a classroom. People learn online, like for example, our online course, where we only meet virtually and we deal with digital learning materials that I send to you through Moodle. People learn on the field through and with the use of technology. And a good example for that is museum visits that are organized using audio guides to walk visitors through the exhibits. So I put on my headphones and I run from room to room, and they tell me, this painting was by Picasso, painted back then, and I'm saying, ew, because I don't like Picasso that much, and so on. Or even when we play a game. So we play a game on the PC. For example, the objective of the game is to help us practice with Spanish. And by playing through the game and trying to guess or to find meaning of foreign words, I practice my foreign Spanish language skills. Now, one may ask here, where do learning analytics come into play? And I will briefly give you 3 points where learning analytics come into play in context. First of all, when we want to assess learners' performance, what skills a learner has mastered and what not. Second, when we want to assess learners' learning progress or process, whether and how learners engage with the learning material, what motivates them, how do they structure their studying. And third, when we want to assess social aspects of learning, so social aspects that underpin learning, for example, peer mentoring, when you sit together and the one classmate tells to the other how to solve the exercise, exchanging information with friends, so you exchange, one writes the assignment and sends it to multiple friends so that they can copy paste with little changes. Or even when we create social dynamics that motivate learners. For example, instead of creating learning groups where nobody knows nobody, I put friends together. Or when I think that friends together will not do a good job, I break them up and I just mix a bit the spirit so that they also, go through the adventure of get to know each other and complement different knowledge backgrounds. So far, so good. So the objectives for today. For week 2. This week's objective is to discuss about context in which learning takes place. And in particular, we're gonna talk about the previous slide. So we're gonna talk about 3 learning contexts in which learning analytics research is quite active. The first is online learning. Somebody made it to the classroom and I have to admit them. So the first is online learning. The second is intelligent tutoring systems. And the third one is technology enhanced learning. And let's start with some definitions. So when we talk about online learning, we talk about learning without spatial or physical restriction that is mediated by some kind of technology. Like, for example, a learning management system like Moodle, a computer that you use in order to log into Moodle, and so on. Naturally, online nowadays is the equivalent term of saying internet. So when we refer to online learning, we imply learning over the internet. However, online learning can very well be learning over the TV. If you were born in the late 70s, so you were a small kid in the 80s, the popular term then for all online learning was TV learning, right? We had these educational TV shows where they would teach basic knowledge to kids, like, for example, how to add numbers or how to learn spelling and so on. So these educational programs through TV is a kind of online learning because each kid can watch it from home. You use technology, the TV back then, yeah, that mediates learning, and you don't have any physical restrictions. You don't need to physically be in the classroom. So online learning, this means that online learning can be synchronous. For example, when we have a specific meeting time in the day, when we gather now, like we gathered now in Zoom, and we use synchronous communication to discuss, or it can very well be asynchronous. Like, for example, when we use a discussion board in order to deliver some learning activity, and you can log in and leave comments on the discussion forum anytime you like, and I can read your comments in my own pace. Or it can be both. So both using synchronous and asynchronous communication modes. Online learning can be facilitated by the use of graphical representations, chat tools, online repositories for distribution of digital learning material, and you very well know the examples of Khan Academy that use video in order to distribute learning, or online learning repositories where you go and you can pick up PDFs to read, audio books to listen to because you prefer to listen than read, and so on and so forth. In any case, however, online learning implies that the teacher and the students are located in separate spaces, or else the instructor is at a distance from the student. Okay? Everything clear so far? Any questions? Okay. So I will continue now with the second example, that is intelligent tutoring system. Intelligent tutors, or else intelligent tutoring systems, and some of you may already have an idea about intelligent tutoring systems, are computer systems that provide immediate instruction and feedback that is customized to individual learners' needs. In other words, intelligent tutoring systems can be perceived or can be understood as these applications or system that you will do something and the system will answer back to you based on what you said. Briefly, intelligent tutors are used for one-to-one tutoring, or in other words, individual learning. So they don't, intelligent tutors don't target a classroom or a group of learners or a community of practice. They target the individual learner alone. Intelligent tutoring systems also are practically based on the idea that practice makes better. That is, learners are guided through learning activities that target a specific skill or piece of knowledge, and they send them to practice with this specific skill or knowledge until the learner masters this skill and not before. In other words, if you don't master the skill, they will not let you get away with it. How they do that? This is the really cool thing about intelligent tutoring systems. They do that by recording every little step that the learners do in the background. And they use this information in order to model the learner's knowledge, and then to provide the feedback that the learner needs based on the student model assessment that runs in the background. So they have the log files. You go in order to solve a math problem. Me as an intelligent tutoring system, I record every step of you. I run my student model and I predict, oh, you have not learned this skill yet, so I will keep you practicing. And next, so intelligent tutoring systems are very big in the United States, and they originated from the United States, and they are kind of common practice there. So they use it in K-12 education, so what we call primary or secondary school. They use it in higher education and so on. However, in Europe, they're not very common. We have fundamentally different pedagogical approaches that we use in Europe and in the rest of the world as well. However, if you're interested in intelligent tutoring systems and you want to know more about it, I share with you these two resources that you might already know. The first one is a set of intelligent tutoring systems for math They target primary math education, and they were developed at Carnegie Mellon University. So you can go there and check out how different intelligent tutoring systems work. And the second one is my personal adventure, when I tried to design and develop a geography tutor from scratch as an example. So this is just for your fun in order to see me struggling with intelligent tutoring systems. Which brings us to the third topic or context. This one is about technology-enhanced learning. Technology-enhanced learning implies learning through or with the use of technology without any temporal or physical restriction. In other words, technology-enhanced learning can be two classmates who program using one computer. So we want to learn Python. We have one computer with a Jupyter notebook, and we try, by shoving and pushing each other because we want to reach the keyboard. It might very well be a group of students who write an essay from each one from their home using Google Docs. So we log on all together on the Google Doc and try to write the essay, and so on. So here, technology can be either the means for bringing people together, so the computer or the platform that we use to communicate, or the medium that supports learning. For example, a touch screen that allow us to draw together a common picture using our fingers. Or it can very well be both. In this sense, our first picture of the traditional auditorium can very well be perceived as a technology-enhanced learning example if we take into account that the teacher uses a projector and the students use computers to take their personal notes. Even better if they use some kind of technology in order to support their interaction. For example, I am the teacher and I use Kahoot on the board, and you use your mobile device to answer, for example, the Kahoot. This is a typical, traditionally technology-enhanced learning example. So in this sense, technology-enhanced learning can be perceived as the umbrella for all kinds of learning that are facilitated or supported by technology. And it is used to describe the application of technology to teaching or learning one way or the other. I'm talking so fast that we will be done in like 5 minutes from now. Okay. So, learning in context. It should be clear by now why learning analytics is applicable in this context and what is the added value they bring. For example, a teacher who is responsible of 15 students who are all located physically in a classroom. It is easy for this teacher to gain insight or to make an assessment about the student's state based on the visual or audio cues available. So for example, if I am the teacher and we're all together in the classroom, what I do in order to understand whether you get what I'm talking about is to ask you, does everybody understand? Are we all on the same page? Do you have any questions? And then looking at you, first of all, listening to your questions, or even looking at your faces, seeing whether you have this look of amazement, or even if you're on your desk sleeping, I can understand what's going on with you. And most importantly, what's going on with me that I'm delivering the content. And therefore, I know what kind of feedback I should give to you. I should say, repeat the last part again, or I should give you an example, or I should tell a joke in order to lighten up the spirits a bit and make it more interesting for you. However, these information channels, so the visual, the gestures, the facial expressions that I see from you, and the audio, your voice, the questions, all these channels are lost if I am in an auditorium with 100 students, still face-to-face, but 100 people to look at, or even worse, when we have an online course. So for example, like ours, now I can see the tiles of a few faces and I can see you nodding. And this is very encouraging for me because I know you're with me. However, if we don't have the Zoom session, when we just try, through Moodle, I lose all this important information that you give back to me. And the only way for me to know your state as learners, how you're doing, or whether you struggle with something, is either to give you an assessment activity, so give you a quiz, give you an assignment, or hoping and praying, even though I'm not extremely religious, but that's another point, that you will email me or text me saying explicitly, I don't get that, or I don't have the time to deal with that, or I don't like it. You know, some kind of assessment that I know we have a problem. The other thing that I can use in order to kind of assess your state is to use your data. So the traces that you leave behind when you log in Moodle in order to check your learning materials, or to text a classmate, or to ask about the assessment. What this data can tell me is how often you engage with the learning materials, whether you're still with us in the course. If you never log into Moodle, most probably you will receive an email from me after like 2 or 3 weeks. Is everything okay? Are you safe? Are you fine? Did you decide to give up on the course? And so on. Or, you know, to see how you interact with your classmates, that you're alive and well and you talk to other people. It should also be clear by now that this data, the way these data look, the log files, the actual log files and the events that are recorded in this data, and the information that the events itself convey is different depending on the context. For example, your behavior in this specific course, where we are like 30, 40 people in a university context, and I know what kind of curriculum you follow and what are your other courses, your behavior is very different, and it's conditional and different than, let's say, for example, if you attend a MOOC. If you attend a MOOC, most probably you're not aiming for a certificate, right? It's rather than just having an experience or learning about a very specific topic. You're one person among a million. You are in a very different cultural context, in the sense that I am from Greece and all the other MOOC people are from India, or so on. So we have a very different context that conditions your behavior. Okay? So the data that I get from a MOOC is very different and should be treated, analyzed, and interpreted very differently because it is a MOOC, and so on. So that's why we should always take into account the context when we deal with data analytics, and that's why data analytics cannot be compared, and it's not comparable to business analytics or to healthcare analytics or any other kind of analytics. In other words, we could say that learning analytics is very different because we try to map and to gain insight about a complex human process. Okay. Practically, this is all I wanted to share with you for today. I don't like keeping these Zoom webinars too long because nobody can concentrate more than 20 minutes. Most importantly, I cannot concentrate for more than 20 minutes on a Zoom conference. And I'm pretty sure, you know, that you will do your homework. You will go back to your learning materials that I will distribute after we end the discussion. And you will gain information from other sources as well. What I still wanted to share with you was a preview of the next episode. Next time, we're gonna talk about data, and data is, the topic of data is structured in 2 sessions. In the first session, we're gonna talk about how data look like depending on the context. We will check out some log files and look for events and how events are recorded in the log files. We will talk about how to interpret or how to gain different interpretations for the same recordings in different log files, and we will use examples from practice to practice. We will also, next time, we will also talk about the first formal assignment of this course. And of course, yeah, if you have any questions about your learning process, materials that you went through and you didn't understand, you can also bring your questions in anytime. On other issues, keep looking for Easter eggs because they pop out from everywhere. So I will keep planting the Easter eggs because it's also very fun for me. I'm very happy when I see my email, you know, receiving an email notification. Oh, I found your Easter egg. About the weekly super short quizzes, these are not related to your assessment. So your performance on the quiz does not affect your grade in any way. The only thing that can happen if you do the super short quizzes is that you gain some plus bonus points, but they are not meant for assessment. They are meant in order for you to be able, to go through the old learning material easier. And they help me to understand what you got out of the learning materials and what not. The bonus points. The bonus points have an expiration date, which means that you can get the bonus points weekly. So for the last week's quiz, the bonus point will expire tonight. If you don't do it by tonight, no bonus point. But then again, you can always go through the quiz and reflect on it and use it for your reading. The consent form, please make sure you fill in the consent form. You don't necessarily have to agree. You don't have to give consent. You can say no, and it will not affect your performance or your learning process at all. It is just for me to know how to organize the hands-on example, because the plan is to have a hands-on example 3 weeks from now where you use your own data. But in order for me to get your data and send it back to you, I have to have your consent. And last, feel free to ask questions. The more you ask, the better for you and the better for me. Elisa, do you have a question, or is it just for fun?
Yeah.
Okay, no. Wait. Because then I will do this and I will say questions. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I didn't understand. Where is the form to consent?
So in week 1, the very last link, it says consent form.
Last link.
Model, week
Model.
1. Yes. Week 1, last link.
Okay, I didn't notice it. Yeah, I'll check soon. Okay.
Very good. Okay, questions about today's topic, last week's topic, anything? Yes, go ahead. Unmute yourself and talk, because it's hard for me to put everything into perspective with the different tiles.
Yeah, so you said the role of learning analytics are in 3 forms: to access learners' performance, to assess learners' progress. What was the third one you mentioned?
To assess social aspects that underpin learning.
Okay, so I didn't catch that.
That's fine, and let me give you a short speech about that. The thing with learning is that learning is a social activity, right? So of course we learn something by reading a book on our own, but we also learn when we talk with friends, right? We learn when we discuss with our teachers, and we don't necessarily learn about the actual topic. So when we discuss together, we don't only learn about learning analytics, we learn other stuff too. How to situate research, for example. I might share an example from writing a paper that might, make sense to you. We learn about social or cultural phenomena. So I'm from Greece, and in Greece, we like to have our coffees always with us. Things like that. So because learning is a social activity, it is very important to also create the environment and for learning to happen, right? Learning doesn't just happen. You have to create an environment for it. So this is also the premise of MOOCs. MOOCs started as these massive courses where thousands of learners would sit together and learn in a social context. So this is a social aspects in learning are also very important, and this is one of the objectives of learning analytics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Questions about the process? Ronya?
Yeah, I have a question, because I was wondering, when it came to the definition of learning analytics, I understood that it was always about big data, and there was always, as you've shown us in the word cloud, computer algorithm But I was wondering if it has to be assessed with a computer, or if I took, say, data from 15, 30 students and I would just analyze it by hand without a computer, would that still be learning analytics, or is the computer actually involved in the definition per se?
So the thing is that learning analytics are, I mean, you cannot put learning analytics and computational apart. Whether the computational part itself is done by a human or it's done by a machine, this is not important. The point is that you have a computational part. So for example, if you take, I don't know, the thing is, how would you train a model by hand, right? You can't, but you can do basic computations by hand, and this is fine. The point is that you have some kind of computational approach associated with your learning analytics. And the same thing goes for data, for collecting data. We usually use the log files from applications, right? So from the log files from mobile phones or from Moodle and so on. Because the thing is that log files are able to get the actual content of the event that happened, to record the timestamp and so on. So it's a rich information. If you can do that by hand for your students, right? Like for example, have a journal and write everything in with timestamps and so on, and then digitalize it somehow and let the computer analyze it for you. That's also learning analytics. But it is important that we have data and that we have some kind of computational approach.
Okay, so if I had like my class and they write an exam and I would do the average score, that's a computational process, and thus it would be a learning analytics already?
Well, this is kind of, you know, an in-between thing that I could see one argue why this is learning analytics, but I wouldn't necessarily call it learning analytics, because computing the average is not really a computational algorithm.
Okay, so
right?
it needs to be a little bigger.
It needs to be a bit computational, yes.
Okay.
However, if one could argue for this being learning analytics, I mean, this is an open field and arguments always are taken into account seriously.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. We have no more questions. Okay, so if this is the case, I would propose to call it a day for today. It's the middle of the week and we have another 2 days to go on. I will upload the usual weekly super short quiz for your in order to support your learning. Again, this is not for assessment, it is only to help you. I will upload other learning materials on Moodle and make it accessible to you. And I will also upload the recording of this webinar. In the meantime, feel free to ask or to get in touch if you want to discuss anything on the topic or beyond. I'm not sure I will be able to answer. I will do my best. Okay? Good. So I would like to thank you for joining the first webinar of the course. And I will see you next week with our topic on data and how do they look like. Have a great week and an even better weekend.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.